possibly considering replacing you? Have you got any indication of that? And what's your response?
No, I don't have any indication of that. The president is fantastic. I'm very proud every single day to be able to work for him.
Do you expect to be serving all 4 years of this administration?
I will serve at the president's pleasure, which I'm very grateful to get to do, and he gives me a wonderful opportunity to do a job that matters for the safety of the American people.
One of President Trump's cabinet members is reportedly on, quote, thin ice. 4 sources telling MS Now that the president is considering removing Kristi Noem as DHS secretary as early as next month.
I want to be very clear. You have misused resources appropriated by Congress. You've engaged in unethical behavior. You have repeatedly made false and misleading statements to Congress and to the press, and you've undermined the separation of powers and disregarded the role of Congress and the courts. Bottom line, you lie with impunity. You reject checks and balances, and you ignore Congress and the courts. Your options are limited. Either you're going to resign, Trump's going to fire you, or you will be impeached. I've already called for your resignation. You may remember I hand-delivered my request to you back in May, and I urge you to reconsider resignation because I've taken the first step towards your impeachment, and I've called on the Judiciary Committee to open an investigation into your lawlessness. The American people will have justice, Secretary, and you will be held accountable.
Kristi Noem is currently throwing shit at the wall, trying not to get fired, and it's not really working. She is in a shit show that looks worse than her Botoxed face. I know it's tough doing what's hard, but we could use more men like, what the fuck was that even supposed to mean? Now, there are a ton of reasons why she's reportedly on such thin ice right now, including her extramarital affair with her chief advisor, Corey Lewandowski. But it turns out the real reason Noem might not even make it to the Super Bowl is a lot more sinister. But the buildup is too humiliatingly juicy to pass up on. So first, here's Noem earlier this week, panicking and nervously laughing after getting confronted with rumors that Donald Trump is considering firing her over her extramarital affair with Corey Lewandowski, which has been dubbed DC's worst-kept secret. A reporter asks if the president is possibly considering replacing her and what indication she has of that. Noem nervously laughs and says, no, she doesn't have any indication of that. The president is fantastic. She's very proud every single day to be able to work for him. By the way, I am trying to do my best to gather all the information I can for you and share it with you. Please leave your likes and comments, and I would be grateful if you subscribed. Let's continue. When asked if she expects to be serving all 4 years in this administration, Noem says she'll serve at the president's pleasure, which she's very grateful to get to do, and he gives her a wonderful opportunity to do a job that matters for the safety of the American people. Now, I personally find her answer as hard to believe as the thought that Donald Trump would fire someone over adultery, especially when you consider that the same day as that interview, this aired on MSNBC. Breaking news. One of President Trump's cabinet members is reportedly on, quote, thin ice. 4 sources telling MSNBC that the president is considering removing Kristi Noem as DHS secretary as early as next month. Yeah, but hey, at least Donald Jolly Trump was kind enough to wait till after Christmas to do what he's done to all of his former wives and throw her ass out to the curb. And this really couldn't come sooner because, as you may have seen, Noem stirred up a lot of controversy on Capitol Hill this week. But I'll remind you, none of these are the actual reasons she's getting fired. Listen to this takedown from a Democratic congressman. He lays out that she has misused resources appropriated by Congress. She's engaged in unethical behavior. She has repeatedly made false and misleading statements to Congress and to the press. She's undermined the separation of powers and disregarded the role of Congress and the courts. Bottom line, she lies with impunity. She rejects checks and balances. She ignores Congress and the courts. Her options are limited. Either she's going to resign, Trump's going to fire her, or she will be impeached. This congressman has already called for her resignation. He hand-delivered his request to her back in May, and he urges her to reconsider resignation because he's taken the first step toward her impeachment and called on the Judiciary Committee to open an investigation into her lawlessness. The American people will have justice, and she will be held accountable. Brilliant points. absolutely devastating, but still not the reason she's getting fired. Perhaps it could be, as Jasmine Crockett presented with receipts, her blatant corruption in her role as head of Homeland Security. Crockett laid out how Noem has not only been busy filming propaganda ads, she's also been busy cashing in on millions of taxpayer dollars. Secretary Noem has funneled millions of dollars to a company called the Strategy Group. The Strategy Group helped Noem win her campaign to become governor of South Dakota. Corey Lewandowski, her top policy advisor, has worked with the firm, and the company's CEO is married to Noem's chief spokesperson, Tricia McLaughlin. This is what corruption looks like. They're stealing money from the American people's pockets and depositing it into their bank accounts. But no, folks, that isn't it either. Much like Trump's brain and his MRI scans, it's actually much simpler. And it's not even Trump's idea to fire her. Listen to this reporting about what's really happening. Those words, very thin ice, came from a White House official in reference to Kristi Noem, who's the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security and an incredibly adamant Trump supporter. At the center of her ousting is the Deputy Chief of Staff to the White House, Stephen Miller, who focuses on policy and homeland security. The frustration from Miller wanting to oust Noem is twofold, according to a White House official. First, there's growing frustration around her inability to build out detention facilities. The big, beautiful bill passed earlier this year had $45 billion allocated to Noem to oversee building these immigration enforcement facilities. Miller has grown increasingly frustrated that she hasn't done that in the efficient time allocated. Second, there have been multiple governors who have called Donald Trump personally to complain about Noem, saying she's not being efficient with FEMA resources and disaster relief funds to states. So really, a twofold frustration that Miller personally has with Noem. But all the sources said very likely at the beginning of the new year, Noem will be out and someone else will be in. Yes, Noem is being pushed out by Stephen Miller because she has not made enough ICE detention centers. She is not being evil enough for MAGA Mr. Burns. Let that sink in. She's being fired not for corruption, not for lying to Congress, not for defying court orders, not for her affair. She's being fired because she's not cruel enough. She's not building concentration camps fast enough for Stephen Miller's taste. The White House has pushed back on this idea that she's getting fired. Donald Trump said she's doing an exceptional job and that he's extremely happy with her. The White House even said reporters were just using old sources. But who are you going to believe? The White House that lies constantly, or actual reporters with 4 different sources, 2 of which are current, including one White House official who spoke on the phone about this imminent news? The White House spokesperson complained that other reporting relied on former officials, but this reporting has current sources, a White House official, people directly involved in the conversations happening right now. This isn't speculation from people on the outside. This is coming from inside the building. And all of that begs the question, who would replace her? And would that be better or worse? There's a short list, according to the White House official. The decision isn't finalized yet, and there are active, ongoing conversations happening in the White House right now as we speak. A couple names have emerged. One is the outgoing governor of Virginia, Glenn Youngkin. He's a top contender according to multiple sources. It's worth noting Youngkin met with DHS and Customs and Border Protection officials recently, likely parsing out this decision as he's being considered for the role. Another name floated is Todd Lyons, who is the acting ICE director. The White House official said he's a very natural fit. So that short list is being worked through, and likely at the top of the year, we could very well see a new director of the Department of Homeland Security. And I am curious about what you think will transpire here and whether either of those people will be better. But it kind of feels like, given the trajectory already, they will be worse. However, I think there is a little bit of a silver lining we should all grasp onto here. At least in part, we collectively, us at Really American, everyone who's been calling her out, South Park specifically, we have ridiculed and bullied a fascist, pathetic, puppy-murdering, adulterer, ghoul of a human being out of her public office. And that is a testament to what we can do when we come together. The collective pressure, the mockery, the exposure of her corruption and incompetence and cruelty, it worked. She became such a liability, such an embarrassment, such a PR disaster, that even this administration that has no shame decided she had to go. But it should also be a call to action, because not everyone is going to be as incompetent or Botoxed as Kristi Noem. And we need to be able to do this again and again to people who will objectively probably be worse, more evil human beings, which is saying something. Because whoever replaces Noem is going to be chosen specifically for their willingness to be crueler, more efficient at building detention centers, more ruthless in implementing Miller's vision. Think about what this tells us about the Trump administration's priorities. Noem survived all the scandals. The affair with Lewandowski, that's DC's worst-kept secret. The corruption, funneling millions to companies connected to her advisor and her spokesperson's husband. The lying to Congress repeatedly. The defying of court orders. The misuse of taxpayer funds. The propaganda videos. All of that was fine. She even survived killing her puppy. Remember that? She wrote in her own book about shooting her 14-month-old dog because it wasn't a good hunting dog. She thought that would make her look tough, and instead it made her a national punchline. But Trump kept her anyway. She survived being exposed for having an affair while presenting herself as a family values conservative. She survived being caught in lie after lie during congressional testimony. She survived representatives calling for her impeachment and demanding her resignation. She survived all of it. But you know what she can't survive? Not building concentration camps fast enough for Stephen Miller. That's the unforgivable sin in this administration. Not corruption, not dishonesty, not defying courts, not violating the Constitution, but failing to implement Miller's cruel immigration agenda with sufficient speed and efficiency. Miller is frustrated she hasn't built enough detention facilities with the $45 billion allocated. Think about that number, $45 billion to build places to lock up immigrants, $45 billion for what are essentially concentration camps. And Miller is mad it's not happening fast enough. This is the same Stephen Miller who gleefully separated children from their parents at the border during Trump's first term. The same Miller who designed the Muslim ban. The same Miller who has spent his entire career demonizing immigrants and dreaming up new ways to make their lives miserable. And Noem, who has been plenty cruel herself, isn't cruel enough for him. The other frustration is governors calling Trump to complain about Noem's handling of FEMA resources and disaster relief, which is rich considering this administration has politicized disaster relief, withholding aid from blue states and threatening states that don't comply with immigration enforcement. But apparently Noem is even too incompetent at that corruption for them to tolerate. So who's on the short list to replace her? Glenn Youngkin, the outgoing Virginia governor who wrote a culture war campaign about critical race theory to victory, who has been positioning himself as a more polished version of Trumpism, who has already been meeting with DHS and Border Protection officials to discuss taking over the role, or Todd Lyons, the acting ICE director, someone already embedded in the immigration enforcement apparatus, someone who presumably has proven their willingness to carry out Miller's agenda without hesitation or complaint. A natural fit, according to the White House, which is terrifying because what makes someone a natural fit in Miller's eyes is enthusiasm for cruelty. For either option is likely to be worse than Noem. Not because Noem was good, she absolutely wasn't, but because whoever replaces her will be chosen specifically for their ability and willingness to do the things she failed to do. Build more detention centers, process deportations faster, be more efficient at the cruelty Miller envisions. And that's the silver lining I mentioned. Yes, we should celebrate that our collective pressure helped make Noem such a liability she's getting fired. The ridicule, the exposure, the constant drumbeat of criticism, it worked. She became indefensible even to an administration with no standards. But we can't stop there. Whoever comes next needs the same treatment, the same scrutiny, the same mockery, the same exposure, because they're going to be worse. They're going to be chosen for their competence at implementing policies we find abhorrent, and we need to make their lives just as difficult as we made Noem's. That's the call to action here. Don't celebrate Noem's impending firing and then move on. Use it as proof that sustained pressure works, that collective action matters, that making someone a national embarrassment, a punchline, a symbol of corruption and incompetence, that it can end careers even in an administration that normalizes corruption and incompetence. South Park did an entire episode mocking Noem for killing her dog. That cultural moment mattered. It made her toxic. It made her a liability. It showed that even in Trump's world, where nothing matters and everything is permissible, there are still some things that can generate enough backlash to become politically untenable. We need to do that again. To Youngkin if he takes the job, to Lyons if he gets promoted, to Miller himself who's orchestrating all of this, to every single person who implements these cruel policies. Make them famous for the wrong reasons. Make them embarrassments. Make them liabilities. The corruption Jasmine Crockett exposed, millions funneled to companies connected to Noem's advisor and spokesperson, that should have been disqualifying. The lying to Congress that representatives detailed, that should have ended her career. The defying of court orders, the constitutional violations, all of it should have mattered. But in this administration, those things don't matter. What matters is optics. What matters is becoming such an embarrassment, such a punchline, such a problem, that even Trump decides you're not worth defending anymore. That's what happened to Noem. That's what can happen to her replacement. So if you're up for the fight, and you should be, because it's only going to get worse from here, then do us a favor. Share these stories. Spread the word. Make sure people know who these officials are and what they're doing. Drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell notification, leave a comment so these stories get out there. And maybe the humor allows it to reach people who may not consider themselves left or right, which is fucking insane, but who probably should be consuming more of this media, informing them about what's going on. Because the next DHS secretary is going to be worse. The policies are going to be more cruel. The detention centers are going to be built. The deportations are going to accelerate. But if we can make the people implementing those policies into national jokes, into symbols of corruption and cruelty, into pariahs who can't go anywhere without being confronted with what they've done, then maybe we can slow it down. Maybe we can throw sand in the gears. Maybe we can make it harder for them to find people willing to take these jobs, knowing they'll become the next Kristi Noem. She's not gone yet. The firing isn't finalized. She's still there causing damage. But the fact that she's on thin ice, the fact that Miller wants her out, the fact that Trump is considering it, that's because of sustained pressure and mockery and exposure. That's because we made her a problem. Let's do it again to whoever comes next, to Miller, to everyone implementing these policies. Make them famous, make them infamous, make them wish they'd chosen different careers. Because that's how we fight back when the normal mechanisms of accountability have been destroyed. We make them pay a social and cultural price even when they face no legal or political consequences. Kristi Noem is learning that lesson. Her replacement will need to learn it too, and the one after that, and the one after that, until they can't find anyone willing to take these jobs anymore because the cost of becoming a national villain isn't worth whatever they're getting paid. That's the fight. That's what we're doing. And judging by Noem's impending firing, it's working. So let's keep going.